Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Childs back here again. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a great day so far. It's Thursday, the 21st of September. I believe there's a song about that. Can't quite remember it. But in today's show, we are going to speak about Chelsea's ownership. More money coming into the club. What is it going to be used for? Why have some quotes from a board member ruffled Chelsea fans' feathers? And then also injuries, because it's Chelsea in 2023. What did you expect? We've got more injury news, unfortunately. Bad news for Mauricio Pochettino and what that means heading into the huge clash against Aston Villa on Sunday at Stamford Bridge in the Premier League. Before we do get into any of that news today, I want to ask you guys, if you're new around here, why haven't you hit the subscribe button? It makes a lot of sense. It's free to do and it helps the show out and hopefully gets Chelsea closer to winning a game of football. That's true. That's not fake. Hit that subscribe button. It's going to help Chelsea out. Also hit that like button, share it around with your friends, get more people involved in the community. And if you're listening on the podcast feed, thank you so much for tuning in too. Let's get into the news. Matt Law reporting for The Telegraph on Wednesday evening that Chelsea are poised for a $400 million boost from US-based investment firm Ares. The Telegraph Sport reported on Tuesday that Chelsea are in talks with a number of prospective investors, and one of those, Ares Management, are expected to inject $500 million, that's £400 million, as part of a preferred equity deal. Also referenced in the second paragraph of this piece is another piece that Matt Law wrote earlier this week around John Terry being interested in buying a stake in Chelsea. The former Chelsea captain is part of a group that is exploring a bid to buy a stake in the club around 10%. With other firms and individuals also interested in buying shares, and co-controlling owner Todd Bowley open to investment offers. The cash injection from Ares will help Chelsea with expansion projects such as the new stadium, which is likely to cost upwards of $1.5 billion, the redevelopment of Cobham, and the club's multi-club plans. That is a bit of a mouthful. Nazar Kinsella reported specifically on Stamford Bridge and its future earlier in the week for the Evening Standard. This was what was in the piece. Chelsea await huge $65 million decision on new stadium build as timeline laid out. Chelsea have now agreed a deal in principle with Stoll, the charity foundation, who will on Wednesday be presented with the findings of a 9-week consultation with residents. The Stoll Board of Trustees hope to make a decision in October, which could kickstart Todd Bowley's plans to redevelop Stamford Bridge and increase its capacity from 42,000 to at least 55,000. In the piece, it also goes on to say that buying the 1.2-acre neighbouring site, which is owned by veterans charity Stoll, will reduce the chances of Chelsea having to find a new home. Apparently, architect Jeanette Marie Smith has been charged with designing what Chelsea believe will be one of the best stadiums in Britain. There's a lot here, and I think the other key bit of info right at the bottom of this piece that I think we'll have to take into consideration. I'm a Chelsea pitch owner. The Chelsea pitch owners do own a freehold of Stamford Bridge. We have delved into this before. And the name Chelsea FC. And they have veto power over any potential move away from the current site in Fulham Broadway, and would need 75% of its shareholders to agree to any potential move. I only own one share. I probably will get another share too. I think if you want to have a say in this matter, I would definitely suggest, I'll link it in the description box below, buy a share. You get a really cool, potentially a framed signature of your favourite player, and as well a potential to go on the pitch and meet the player. But the main thing is having a say in this matter and making your voice heard if you don't want Chelsea to leave Stamford Bridge. There is a lot to delve into here, because it isn't just about the money and what that money means. I think there is a general feeling of apathy and disconnect currently that is being felt by supporters, not just people being reactionary. And there are deep concerns in the way it is being managed and where it is heading. Some of that has to do with the away subsidy being taken away earlier this season, which I thought was just a boneheaded move by the club. I thought it was just a PR own goal. Whatever argument they try and make, it is very rich to hear Chelsea try and make an argument that finances are tight and they can't basically incur the cost of this. It shows a lack of care for supporters, your most loyal supporters. For some people who do travel home and away, specifically away, and the way TV companies mess around supporters in this country with kickoff times, it's a massive commitment. And it's a gesture. And to take away that, I think was a further slap in the face to probably people who were home and away last season, who watched some disastrous performances and saw what went on, and were going to be even more angry by this. And I think they're right to feel frustrated. And kind of this fear of where Chelsea are going, what is going to be the identity of Chelsea? Is it going to reflect a club that people can actually, in the local community, or just those that have grown up watching Chelsea, supporting it from families who support Chelsea, will they see a club that they feel adequately represents them? I think that is a massive concern. And also a concern generally that we've been having for a while is fans being priced out of Stamford Bridge. I think that is a very valid concern. So we can talk about how I personally feel like the redevelopment of Stamford Bridge is important. I do think it needs to be modernised. I adore Stamford Bridge. I've loved going to that stadium from the moment I walked into it. I call it the cathedral. But I think there needs to be an acceptance because of the demand for tickets, because of the way Chelsea want to compete. If they want to compete at the top level and the way this ownership says they want to, there is an understanding that evolution needs to happen. Stamford Bridge wasn't always the way it is right now. Things need to evolve. And we have delved into this issue before in terms of Else Court, which, still I think looks like a very unlikely option, but it's still potentially there as an alternative, and I think the best alternative option you have. But the concern of redeveloping Stamford Bridge, meaning we'd have to go to Wembley for a few years, I don't think is the nicest reality. But there is that. There's the multi-club plans, where Strasbourg has already happened. Sporting Lisbon is another one. I've got to admit that the more I've seen this and read this and saw the protests from Strasbourg fans and saw some of the reaction actually from Chelsea fans that I thought was a little bit tone deaf of why Strasbourg fans protested, just makes me more and more unlikely to feel that this multi-club model is going to do much. It doesn't. I've said this before. I don't think it does much for me as a fan. Like, how does it improve my experience as a supporter going to Stamford Bridge? I'm not sure it increases my love for Chelsea anyway. Like, I'm not going to be someone who's going to actively, I may go and watch a Strasbourg game if I'm potentially, traveling, doing one of my European tours. I mean, maybe that's a reason I'd go there, but I don't see what way it radically improves what we already have. And to see how it angers fans of those clubs that mean a lot to their community. This was a club that once, was at the top of the French game and is obviously struggling now. Just having good players, just having transfers. Some people still seem to think that just having transfers is the only thing that matters to football supporters. Evidently it doesn't, because although Chelsea have helped Strasbourg out financially, there is a rejection of the way the game's going and kind of the feeling that the club is being distanced from them and their local community. So I can understand that. And I also think that, these consistent briefs of these plans. I mean, there was a massive piece by Sam Wallace. I didn't get to do a show on it. Maybe we will come back to it at a later point, of this 100-point goal, of this kind of massive plan that Chelsea have of what they want to do. The briefing of, there's this wonderful project that we keep being told about. And then you see the evidence on the pitch is frantic. It's been up and down. It feels like at times Chelsea don't know what direction they're going in. It's understandable. I think it's not silly for fans to kind of have their concerns when they see the amount of money being spent, some players leaving, seeing how certain supporters have been treated throughout this period. And I think that feeling of disconnect comes into this quote from Jose E. Feliciano, who's one of the board members at Chelsea, obviously part of Clear Lake 2, and kind of his surprise that there's so much interest in the club. So we'll go for it, because I do want to be fair here and actually give more than just a quote that's been doing the rounds, and actually get some more of his answer so you can get it in more context. Because I sometimes, the first time I read this quote, I was like, well, what did he say before and after? And this is what he had to say. So Ben Jacobs, we're taking it from Ben Jacobs on Twitter, who tweeted out basically the thread of what he said. He said, in Paris, this was at the IPEM, we're taking a little bit of pain up front. We've bought an asset that's very coveted by other potential buyers. Ultimately, we're extremely aligned with the fans, because the best way to make our club more valuable is to win. You could definitely rationalize that there's a lot more focus on a sports team than an obscure packaging company. But sometimes you have a conversation with somebody that immediately gets leaked to the press, and that was something that was very new to us. We own probably a dozen businesses at Clear Lake that are larger than Chelsea, and many of those are actually undergoing even more significant transformations. They tend to be enterprise software businesses, packaging companies, but you don't ask me about those because you don't care about those, and they don't get reported by the Telegraph and the Daily Mail every day. And he ended speaking about Chelsea spending. We sold $500 million of players and reduced the salaries and essentially the operating costs of the business by over $100 million a year. I can't believe that they had no idea what the interest, because we had such a public takeover period, probably the most public we've ever seen. I mean, obviously now we've had the Man United thing ongoing, but this was so public with the sanctions and the takeover and the vetting and the public kind of profiling of all of the people involved and interested in buying Chelsea. So it was not some kind of smoke and mirrors thing where we didn't know who Chelsea were going to have as their new ownership, until they actually arrived, like Roman Abramovich was. This was very public. So the idea that they had no idea, like they had no concept of the interest in football. And even I know I'm not an expert on American sport, but even if you're coming from an American background, there is massive attention. There is a massive business and industry, as I know, even from a very casual and kind of outsider point of view on the major American sports. So it's not like they're coming from a place where there isn't major interest in those sports. Maybe it's reported and kind of delved into in a different way. And maybe because we don't have franchises over here, it is very community based. But that kind of quote, I can understand why it's annoyed some people, and it very much leads into this idea that the ownership group don't really have a concept of what's very important to the fans, and what it means, what Chelsea means beyond just spending a lot of money and also just winning games, because there is a community behind it, there's an academy behind it, there are traditions, there is the local community, what Chelsea means to West London, that I think a lot of people are probably concerned by when you hear quotes like this, and actually people being out of their depth in terms of all these big ambitions that the club has had, this new ownership group has had, specifically from the commercial side. I mean, Matt Law made this point on the London is Blue pod that out of all the things you could have accused them by and maybe accepted that, yeah, sure, learning on the job a little bit in terms of working their way into European football for the first time, but the commercial side of not having a sponsorship. Listen, I love the fact that there's no sponsor on the front of our kits, especially the home one. It makes it one of the best shirts Chelsea have had in years. As someone who gets tired of a lot of football kits, I think as a purist, me and Jay McIntosh, we've been calling for it for years. And even though it came by a mistake, basically, and fumbling of getting a new sponsor, I'm happy. But just in terms of their ability to make Chelsea more commercially successful, that's a failure. There's no two ways around that. There's no way you can sugarcoat that. It looks bad because it wasn't by design. Chelsea would have wanted, that ownership would have wanted a sponsor on the front of their shirt this season. And the fact that it still hasn't been sorted and, we're nearly in October is not a good sign. And it questions their kind of approach, even if they do say they want to win. Hopefully I wasn't rambling too much. We did need to get through that because there is a lot going on at Chelsea at the moment. And, whether it's the signing of so many players, the desire to sign even more players, and even as someone who covers Chelsea, trying to keep up with it all is very, very difficult. You're a US-based fan, maybe you'll have more insight on this in terms of the American perspective here. Because I'm mostly surprised that someone on that board who would come into a club like Chelsea would not understand the interest in a massive sporting brand, if we want to call it that, if they're referring to it as that just baffles my mind a bit. If I walked into the LA Dodgers, I would suspect that probably there would be some big press around that club, that team, because it's a big team in LA. That's as far as I know about baseball, other than watching Moneyball, one of my favorite films. I mean, but it's just it comes across as a little bit naive. But now moving on to the second story, and it's not a great one. Benoit Badiashile has apparently sustained a minor setback in his recovery from a hamstring injury at the end of last week. He has now returned back to individual training, but is hoping to resume team training again next week. That was from Nathan Gissing. And Bobby Vincent from Football.London has reported that there was even hope he could have joined the squad, been involved against Aston Villa, but now, of course, that will not be the case. And apparently Moises Caicedo did not train on Wednesday either. This is just dreadful. It really is. It gets worse and worse. It feels like every day. feels like a Chelsea player is literally getting injured, or there's some bad injury news every single day. I know that is absolutely an exaggeration, but I've never seen something like this before, like where you consistently get injury after injury after injury and the setbacks consistently, especially for someone like Badiashile. And I always think, for the players themselves, and especially Badiashile, who had a really good start to his Chelsea career. I think as bad as last season was, considering he came in during January and things were so frantic, I think he looked one of the few assured players within that. And I also think Benoit Badiashile is proof that buying young players and not buying experienced players doesn't mean you don't get mature players. I think Badiashile looks like a very competent and he looks in control for me. So it's such a shame because I want to see more of him this season, but hopefully he can return pretty soon, hopefully before the next international break, because the run of fixtures Chelsea have coming up now, we've got Aston Villa on Sunday, and then we've got, I believe, Brighton in the Carabao Cup. At the end of this period before the next international break is Arsenal at home, which is not great. Obviously, that's going to be a really difficult game. So Poch needs some players back desperately. Hopefully we will see that. That is it for today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow either with a news show or most likely starting to look ahead, obviously, to the weekend's game. I hope to have my team selector returning, the first of this season, where I break down the upcoming game. If you'd like to see that show, if you're excited about Chelsea content, I was going to say excited about Chelsea. I'm not sure many are at the moment, and I can understand why. But if you're excited about seeing that show, please do hit that like button. Please do share the content around. Really helps out. If you do have some spare change lying around and do want to support the show financially, buy me a coffee. I've got a page down there in a link below, not only on YouTube but also on the podcast. If you look at the show notes, buy me a coffee, Son of Chelsea. You can go on there, you can support the show in a way you can. It really does help make the channel better. But thank you guys for watching. Follow me on the socials and I will see you again very soon. All the best.